Welcome, everyone. I'm excited to welcome you to today's presentation. We're going to explore the spreading of dead zones on the marine ecosystem. On this first slide, you'll see the title and subtitle that set the stage for what's to come. Throughout this session, we'll look at what causes these dead zones, how they impact marine life, and what we can do to address this growing issue. Let's dive in. Let's start with the concept of dead zones. These are areas in oceans or large lakes where oxygen levels are extremely low, a condition known as hypoxia. When oxygen drops so much that marine life cannot survive, these zones become particularly dangerous. The main cause of dead zones is nutrient pollution. Specifically, excess nitrogen and phosphorus enter the water from sources like agriculture, sewage, and industrial discharge. These nutrients act like fertilizers, fueling the growth of algae and other plant life. When these algae die and decay, they consume a lot of oxygen, which leads to the hypoxic conditions we associate with dead zones. Now, why does this matter? Because dead zones threaten marine biodiversity, meaning the variety of life in these ecosystems. They also impact fisheries, which are vital for local economies and food security. And finally, they pose a threat to coastal livelihoods, affecting communities that depend on healthy oceans and lakes for their well-being. Throughout this presentation, we'll explore how these zones develop, their broader impacts, and what we can do to address this pressing issue. Let's talk about the ecological consequences of these changes. One major impact is the loss of marine biodiversity. When oxygen levels drop, many species like fish and crabs, which depend on oxygen to survive, simply can't make it. This means we're losing a lot of the diversity that makes our oceans vibrant and resilient. Interestingly, only species that can tolerate low oxygen levels, such as jellyfish, tend to thrive under these conditions. While that might sound like a small silver lining, it actually leads to a less diverse ecosystem overall. When a few hardy species dominate, the richness and balance of marine life are seriously threatened, which can have ripple effects throughout the entire food web. This ties directly into the overall theme of how environmental changes are reshaping our oceans, often in ways that threaten their health and complexity. Now, let's look at the collapse of food chains. When zooplankton and small fish die off, it doesn't just affect those tiny creatures. It has a ripple effect that impacts larger predators higher up the chain. This kind of disruption at the base weakens the entire marine food web because each level depends on the level below it. Without a stable foundation, the whole system becomes fragile and more vulnerable to collapse. Moving on to habitat destruction, we see that vital ecosystems like coral reefs, seagrass beds, and benthic environments are degrading. These habitats are crucial breeding grounds for many marine species, and their long-term damage can seriously threaten the survival of these species. When these habitats are destroyed, it hampers reproductive success and can lead to declines in populations, further destabilizing the marine ecosystem. Both of these issues, food chain collapse and habitat destruction, are interconnected and highlight the broader theme of how human activities and environmental changes are putting immense pressure on our oceans. Protecting these foundational elements is essential for maintaining healthy, resilient marine ecosystems. Let's talk about the economic consequences of environmental issues, starting with the decline in fisheries. When fish stocks decline, especially those that are commercially important, it directly impacts our food supply. This isn't just about losing fish. It affects the entire supply chain and food security for many communities. Next, we see how this decline impacts coastal communities that rely heavily on fishing for their livelihoods. When the fish are gone or become scarce, these communities face unemployment and increasing poverty, which can have a ripple effect on local economies and social stability. Finally, there's the impact on tourism. Dead zones in the water, areas with very low oxygen levels, damage water quality and beaches. This not only harms marine life, but also makes these areas less attractive for ecotourism, which many regions depend on for their economic prosperity. Overall, these economic consequences highlight how environmental health is directly tied to economic stability and community well-being. Now, let's look at how climate change is linked to these environmental issues. First, dead zones actually release nitrous oxide, which is a potent greenhouse gas. This means that these areas not only suffer from low oxygen, but also contribute to global warming. Next, as our oceans warm, they become less capable of holding oxygen, which worsens oxygen depletion even further. This creates a vicious feedback loop. Warmer water leads to less oxygen, which in turn can cause more dead zones and further impacts on marine life. Finally, we're seeing an intensification of algal blooms as temperatures rise and nutrient runoff increases. These blooms can be devastating, blocking sunlight and depleting oxygen in the water, and their growth is directly tied to climate change. Overall, these connections highlight how climate change exacerbates existing environmental challenges, making it a key factor that we need to address in our efforts to protect marine ecosystems. Let's talk about some of the social and human consequences of the issues we've been discussing. First, food security becomes a major concern in countries that rely heavily on seafood for their nutrition and livelihoods. When fish populations decline or become unsafe, it directly impacts people's access to essential food sources. Next, there's the health risk posed by toxic algal blooms. These harmful algae can produce toxins that affect both humans and animals, leading to serious health problems if contaminated seafood is consumed or if people are exposed to affected waters. Finally, we might see coastal migration increase. If fishing communities lose their livelihoods due to declining fish stocks or environmental changes, people may move away from coastal areas in search of new opportunities. This shift can have profound social and economic impacts on communities and regions. Overall, these points highlight how environmental changes are not just ecological issues. They deeply affect human lives, health, and social stability. Let's take a look at some of the key hotspots where dead zones are particularly problematic around the world. First, the Gulf of Mexico stands out as the largest recurring dead zone, primarily influenced by nutrient runoff from agriculture and urban areas in the Mississippi River basin. This results in hypoxic conditions that severely impact marine life there. Beyond that, we see several other critical regions, including the Baltic Sea, Arabian Sea, Bay of Bengal, and parts of the Pacific Ocean. These areas are also experiencing increasing oxygen depletion, often due to similar factors like nutrient pollution and climate change. What's really concerning is that the number of dead zones worldwide is on the rise. Currently, there are over 400 recorded dead zones, and this number continues to grow. This trend highlights a growing global issue linked to human activities and environmental pressures. Connecting this back to our overall theme, these hotspots remind us how widespread and urgent the problem of hypoxia is, emphasizing the need for effective management and mitigation strategies to protect our oceans and marine ecosystems. Let's talk about some strategies to mitigate dead zones in our oceans. One of the key approaches is reducing fertilizer and sewage runoff, which can be achieved through more sustainable farming practices. By doing so, we limit the excess nutrients that fuel dead zone formation. Another important strategy is improving wastewater treatment before the water is discharged into rivers and seas. Better treatment means fewer nutrients and pollutants reaching sensitive marine environments. We should also promote the restoration of wetlands and mangroves, as these ecosystems act like natural filters, capturing nutrients before they reach larger water bodies. Restoring these habitats not only helps reduce nutrient loads, but also supports biodiversity and coastal protection. Finally, international cooperation plays a vital role. Since marine pollution often crosses borders, working together globally is essential to effectively control and reduce the pollution that contributes to dead zones. All these strategies tie back to the overall goal of protecting our oceans and ensuring their health for future generations. So, to wrap up, dead zones are a serious ecological crisis that we can't ignore. They have a profound impact on marine biodiversity, meaning they reduce the variety and abundance of marine life. This disruption of food webs affects many species, from tiny plankton to large fish, which in turn impacts the entire ecosystem. Moreover, dead zones harm fisheries, threatening the livelihoods of communities that depend on fishing. And importantly, they also contribute to climate change, creating a feedback loop that worsens the problem. To effectively address dead zones, we need integrated policies. These should combine environmental protection efforts, sustainable agricultural practices, and climate action. Only by working across sectors can we hope to reduce their severity and protect our oceans for future generations. This ties back to our overall theme, the importance of holistic approaches to ecological challenges. Let's take a moment to summarize what we've learned about dead zones. These are essentially oxygen-depleted areas in our oceans, where marine life struggles to survive. The main causes behind these dead zones include nutrient pollution from sources like sewage and industrial waste, which lead to excessive algae growth. When these algae die and decompose, they consume a lot of oxygen, creating these hypoxic conditions. Climate change also plays a significant role by warming waters and reducing oxygen levels further. The effects of dead zones are quite serious. We see a loss of biodiversity and fish stocks, which impacts both ecosystems and human communities that rely on fishing. Moreover, dead zones can cause the collapse of entire marine food chains, disrupting the balance of ocean life. Understanding these impacts is crucial as we work toward solutions. Addressing the causes of dead zones not only helps protect marine environments, but also ensures the sustainability of the resources we depend on. Let's take a moment to consider the broader impact of these issues on our economy. The decline in fisheries and tourism due to environmental degradation can lead to significant economic losses, affecting communities and livelihoods that depend on these industries. Additionally, these problems are interconnected with climate change. Excess nutrients and pollutants often contribute to greenhouse gas emissions, which in turn accelerate climate change, creating a vicious cycle. So, what can we do about it? There are several solutions that can make a real difference. First, reducing nutrient runoff is crucial. This means managing agricultural practices and controlling what gets washed into our waterways. Improving wastewater treatment is another key step, ensuring pollutants are properly filtered before reaching natural ecosystems. Lastly, restoring ecosystems, such as wetlands and mangroves, can help filter pollutants naturally and rebuild resilience in these environments. Overall, addressing these issues not only protects our natural resources, but also supports a healthier economy and a more sustainable future. Thanks for watching, everyone. I really appreciate you taking the time to go through this presentation with me today. If you found this content helpful or interesting, please don't forget to like and subscribe to @Ups Magazine. Your support helps us bring more valuable insights and updates to you. Thanks again for being here, and I look forward to connecting with you in future content.